The combine is over. Free agency is upon us. You know I like getting smarter people than me on this show. Today is no different. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. One of my dear friends with this Locked On NFL sector of Locked On Podcast Network, Marcus Mosher, joins me. Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty, works with Pro Football Focus, the 33rd team. The dude doesn't sleep. Thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. I love talking some Cardinals. It's a fun time of the year if you're a Cardinal fan.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So I usually have Marcus on twice a year, once right in the dead of summer, when there's just like, hey, let's talk to somebody else. So I don't have to look at, myself in the camera all day. And then usually right around this time, because Marcus is one of the smarter draft minds, free agency minds, team building minds that I have in my Rolodex. And I'm fascinated now, especially with somebody who's, does Locked On Cowboys, does Locked On Dynasty. So you have that, future pacing approach when it comes to building a team and having sustainable success. How would you look at the Cardinals where they are now after last year? And this is the most important one. I'll give you 6 minutes here. What would you do with the $50 million in cap space going into the draft to set the stage for what they do with drafting some young players coming out of college?
First of all, they're just in a leaps and bounds better spot than they were at this time last year, right? Because Kyler Murray's healthy, right? They have a coach that I think a lot of people around the NFL really respect. I mean, believe it or not, at this time last year, a lot of people kind of thought Jonathan Gannon was a joke, right? Like we all saw that Twitter clip and everybody was making fun of him. Look how much things have changed in a year. Like very well respected. And now you've got these first round picks. You've got this pick at number 4 and what I think is an historically great draft. I think the Cardinals are set up really, really well. I don't think they have, I'm not saying to have like a Houston Texans type of rise, but could they go from what they were last year to a 9-8 team that's borderline in the playoffs this year? Absolutely. Why not?
They've got so much money to spend. They have needs everywhere. And they have 6 picks in the top 100. So when you build a roster for sustained success or be positioned to have sustained success, and let's say Kyler Murray works out, and he's going to be here for the next 3 or 4 years, just for simplicity purposes. What are you targeting this offseason? And what are you looking at? We'll talk about the draft next segment, but it is like, do you just throw money at Christian Wilkins? Do you go get 2 veteran corners? You're like, okay, now you can just set and forget there. Do you go get a left tackle in free agency, or do you draft one with 27? Like, how would you construct this if you were Monti Ossenfort with pretty much all the colors in the crayon box to use?
What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't overspend on guys that just aren't going to be here for the long term, right? Like I think Christian Wilkins is like a really good example of somebody that is going to be worth the money that somebody pays, but I don't think Arizona is the type of team that should be all that interested, because Wilkins is going to want to go to a team that's going to win now. And as much as I like the long-term outlook of the Cardinals, I think you and I can both agree they're probably not winning the Super Bowl this year, right? So I want to go out and get 2 or 3 guys that I think can be core contributors for the next 3 or 4 years. So I'm prioritizing players that are in that 25 to 27, year old window. And if you can only go out and get one of those players, that's fine. I'd rather try to find one cornerstone player that's in that range. So to me, you mentioned like offensive tackle. I think that's a spot to target. Unfortunately, you and I have looked at this market endlessly. There's not a franchise tackle out there that's under the age of 30. In fact, there's probably just not an offensive tackle. Now, there might be some quality guards out there that you can go get. I think that's probably where you're looking, is try to improve the interior of your offensive line, grab a couple dudes on defense that can just be quality starters, and just wait for the right opportunities to come up. I do think you're going to see the Cardinals be aggressive, but don't expect them to chase the Christian Wilkins or those types of players in free agency.
Yeah, because you don't want to fall into the, and I'm using two wide receivers just an example, the Corey Davis, Christian Kirk trap, just where it's like there's so much money to spend that you're just going to spend it. The Cardinals will have more money than King Midas next offseason.
Yes.
So this is just a little appetizer to what they do next year. And they've never, like, I say this confidently, like, I worked in sports radio since 2010 here. Like, I didn't grow up here. I wasn't here during the, I wasn't old enough for the St. Louis Cardinals days, but I'm making a conscious, educated guess here. The Cardinals have never been positioned for success like this in back-to-back years, ever.
No.
Ever. Like, this is something where you do a hard reset and look what happens. All they have are possibilities. Now the restrictor plate is taken off. Every day these are the coined phrases that I use constantly. So having reservation for this year may be the way to go, is what you're saying. Like, spend some money, get some veterans in, and then just draft. If you can draft perfectly and have the shrubbery of veterans to teach the young guys, is that kind of the perfect storm here for the Cardinals?
Yeah.
In a good way?
I mean, I don't think they need to go out and get, I'm looking like Danielle Hunter. Like, I think Danielle Hunter, 29 years old, probably has another year or 2 years left of elite play. That just doesn't do anything long-term for you. However, maybe you go out and get somebody like a Chase Young and you give him a 2-year deal just to wait and see. I'm just using Chase Young as an example, but that's somebody who's 25 years old, who maybe still does have his best football ahead of him. Those are the kind of players, if I were the Arizona Cardinals, I would be trying to target. And on the top of that, I would try to keep your own. I'm not sure what the situation is with Hollywood Brown. I think he makes so much sense as a number 2 receiver in this offense. We'll get to the draft in a little bit, but even more so, maybe like a third option in your passing attack because of the development of Trey McBride. You also have a slot receiver that I like, Greg Dortch, who's a free agent. You bring him back. I would try to do things like that rather than spending a gajillion dollars in free agency on some veterans that just aren't going to be here by 2026.
Yeah. It's a tough spot, especially for Cardinals fans to stomach, because the longtime fans have been dealing with this forever. It's like, okay, just do something already. And I understand that. And where you're coming from, it's like, it's always slow and steady. What Houston did was they stacked 3 drafts in a row. This wasn't just CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. Like Nico Collins, Derek Stingley, they had guys they've built towards this, and they ended up just hitting a home run with CJ Stroud.
Well, can I give you another example, Alex?
Yeah.
Look at the Lions, right? The Lions,
Exactly.
They hit on Penei Sewell. They hit on Aiden Hutchinson. They didn't make big splashes in free agency, but they got quality players. And that's, I think, what Arizona is trying to build to. The thing that they have going for them, but the Lions don't, is they have a better quarterback who's really young and I think is on a pretty team-friendly deal, to be honest with you. And you've got all these first-round picks, and you've got the number 4 overall pick. I think they're in a good spot. Yeah.
And, I'm a Kyler Murray guy. You've seen in our Twitter DMs, that I wasn't the biggest fan of Cliff Kingsbury. And I think that Kyler Murray's finally in a situation, especially with Drew Petzing's offense, which is a big boy offense. You can run the ball. You can run play action. You've got a solid tight end. You're going to have a solid wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, most likely. And I agree with you about Hollywood Brown. But the thing with Hollywood Brown, before we pivot here, because this will be a good transition into the draft talk, he shares an agent with, and you very well know this, shares an agent with DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown, all of whom never saw that last year on their rookie scale contract. I know Deebo was 1 year less because he was a second-round pick, but they all got massive money. And I'm assuming that Hollywood Brown's going to want more than maybe what the Cardinals want to give. And this whole Kyler Murray and he are friends, best friends thing, that's for teams that aren't in contention. You really need to be thinking about what's best for this team and not Steve Keim keeping his job. So do you really think that Hollywood Brown, with the company that he shares, even though he's not a top-tier wide receiver like those 3 guys or whatever you want to call Deebo Samuel at this point, like, do you think that he's going to garner $10 million a year, or do you think those years are gone already?
No, I think he's still going to get that. In fact, the number that I've been kind of hearing is like 12 to 14 million a year. And I think if I'm the Cardinals, I just do that. I mean, let's say it's a 3-year deal and he's making on average $13 to $14 million a year. In all reality, that's not that much money, especially when you consider like what Michael Gallup and Zay Jones and some of those other receivers got over the last couple off seasons. I think this is the type of guy that you keep. You pair him with a Malik Neighbors, with a Marvin Harrison Jr. or Rome Odunze, and you just make sure that Kyler Murray has as many weapons as possible. And then you try to figure out the rest, because the last thing I want to worry about is, okay, can Michael Wilson stay healthy this year? Can we find another outside receiver that can win down the field? To me, this is a cheap cost to pay for a receiver who's 26 years old and I think fits the offense fairly well.
Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty, Pro Football Focus, 33rd Team, everything in between. Joining me here talking Cardinals offseason, Cardinals draft, as we pivot from combine to free agency. I cannot believe, we're almost a month away from the 2023 Super Bowl happening. Like, this is so wild how things move so fast this time of year. What are the Cardinals going to do after the draft, or after the combine, looking towards the draft? We'll discuss it next, what Marcus thinks. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. This is the time of year where the NBA goes Looney Tunes. Look what the Lakers did to OKC last night. Look at what Denver did to the Lakers a couple nights before that. If you want to bet futures for the NBA championship, good luck. But FanDuel's got you covered with all of it. You want to take a long shot with the Lakers? You want to take a long shot with the Suns? You want to take the odds-on favorite with Boston, who beat the Warriors by 100 on Sunday? FanDuel's got you covered for all of it. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And that's what we call the wrong transition. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys. More importantly, for this this podcast, at Pro Football Focus and 33rd Team, talking draft, talking Cardinals offseason. It's fascinating. Like, it truly is a choose-your-own adventure for Monti Ossenfort. Like, he can do whatever he wants. And we saw last season during the draft that he did. And he waited till the last second. There was that really badass war room conversation with Nick Caserio where he traded back to 12 and then traded back up for Paris Johnson Jr. Jonathan Gannon looked like it was his first time at Disneyland wearing his dad's suit. It's just one of these things that's super unfortunate for head coach. But with Jonathan Gannon, what you mentioned, right when the preseason week 1, you're like, oh, he's a head coach immediately. You can see it. D'Amico Ryans is the guy that I use where it's like, when he was in San Francisco, that dude was a head coach. He just didn't have that title or, the responsibilities where he just looked the part. Jonathan Gannon does now. Pivoting into the draft post-combine. Cardinals have the 4th overall pick. They've got 27. They've got 35. And they've got 3 in the 3rd round. Okay? With all of this chatter that it was Marvin Harrison Jr. to New England for like 10 minutes, and then now we're back to all quarterbacks, which is what we think it's going to be. Caleb Williams and either Drake May or Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, Drake May, maybe J.J. McCarthy, whatever it may be. At 4, say the Cardinals get a call for a quarterback at 4 to move back to 12, to Denver, or to the Raiders, outside of the top 10. If you are the Cardinals, you get a future first, you get a second this year, you get a third next year, whatever the normal package is to move that far back. Are you drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. there, or are you taking the picks to be able to kick this can positively down the road for hopefully sustained success with top picks?
I am of the belief that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a generational talent. And for the most part, you don't trade away from generational talents. I also just think of all the receivers in this class, he fits Arizona and he fits he fits Kyler Murray the best. So I'm not trading.
Why do you say that?
Yeah. Well,
show your work on that.
Kyler really has never had a receiver that can stretch the field that also has size in this offense. They tried it with AJ Green, but he was washed up beyond belief. If you go back to Kyler's days at Oklahoma, he was so good at throwing the ball down the sideline. He just needs somebody that can create separation and do that. And Marvin Harrison Jr. does it better than anybody else in this class. They have the intermediate weapon in Trey McBride. I think they're going to bring back Hollywood to give you some speed. I mentioned Greg Dortch. Again, I really like Greg Dortch. I think he's a very good slot receiver. Mm-hmm. They need that guy on the outside that can win in one-on-one situations with length, with speed, and with athleticism, and he has that. So I'm not trading away from Marvin Harrison Jr. if I can help it. I will also say it depends on the package. Yep. If I were the Cardinals, I wouldn't be interested, or let me rephrase that. I wouldn't be all that interested in acquiring future first-round picks because this draft is so incredibly strong, at least in the first round, where I want as many picks in this draft as possible inside the top 50. So if they trade down from 4 to 12 or 13, like you mentioned, I want to get another first-round pick in this year's class, whether it's multiple second-round picks that I can move up to. I want to come away from this draft with like 4 cornerstone players if I'm not drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. And that's just going to be really hard because outside of the Cardinals, is there another team that has multiple first-round picks in this draft? I'm kind of blanking. I don't think so, correct?
No, because Houston has Cleveland's, but the Cardinals have Houston's. No, I think you're right.
So that makes it really hard. I wouldn't be opposed for the Cardinals trading back up in the first round, or if you want to trade back from the second first round pick, but I would stick there, fill your biggest need with a generational prospect and move on to the rest of the draft.
Got it. And that's fine. Like I've been back and forth and I understand, like I have to disclaim that if they draft Marvin Harrison Jr., that's going to make them better. Okay. This isn't like, oh no, this is Levi Brown all over again. Relax. Okay. And I also look at Joe Alt, who is a transcendent brick of a man that you could put at left tackle for the next Trent Williams years. Okay. And you look at Paris Johnson Jr., who they're reported to keep on the right side. And it's like, why? Why are you keeping him on the right side if you don't have a plan to bring somebody in to play left tackle and have the bookends for Kyler Murray, hopefully for the next decade? That's what I can't get my head across. And DJ Humphries wasn't good last year when he was healthy. Kelvin Beachum is your swing tackle, but you're not going to start Kelvin Beachum on the left side. And the left guard is a huge liability with Elijah Wilkerson, whoever they bring in. I'm assuming they're going to address that in free agency.
I would agree.
But I can't wrap my head around why they'd keep Paris Johnson Jr. on the side that was not natural to him if they're not going to make a move to bring somebody in on the left side. That's what is thwarting my brain.
And I get it. And maybe they feel like they could potentially find that left tackle with their second first-round pick or, a second-round pick. It is a little bit confusing. And I understand the Joe Alt love. Like, this is a really good Notre Dame prospect who tested very well at the NFL Combine. But in my mind, and again, I could be completely wrong here, I think there's a gap in talent between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Joe Alt. And I understand the positional value between left tackle and receiver.
Yeah, of course.
I kind of think it's harder to find those bona fide number one receivers that can win on the outside and in the slot versus a left tackle. I think you can go out and find average left tackle play. It's very, very hard to find those guys that can be transcendent receivers at wide receiver.
Yeah, especially with how much money they're making now. Like, that's the whole thing. It's like, if you can draft a stud at edge rusher, wide receiver, positions that make a whole bunch of cheese during their second contract, and you have that 5th year control. I mean, it makes sense. Marcus Mosher, Pro Football Focus, 33rd team, Locked On Cowboys as well. I'll get you out of here on this. Like, I'd love to talk to you for another hour. But at 27, second round, 3 third-round picks, if you are Monti Ossenfort and you've covered the draft inside and out, trade up, trade down, like benefits, the grading, the rating of all of these picks, if you're Monti Ossenfort and you have this roster pretty much devoid of talent, aside from safety, running back, and right tackle and quarterback, really, and tight end, are you making all 6 of these picks in the 3rd round? Or, like you mentioned, those 3rd-round picks may be more valuable this year than they've been in the last handful of years because of how deep this draft is, especially in the first round and a half. Are you making waves and trying to get 4 guys out of this 6? Or you're like, listen, we've got 3 picks between 66 and 95. Are you just sticking and picking all 6 of these picks?
I'm making all the picks. And to be honest, I might try to trade down from that first round pick and try to get more. This roster needs more talent in the middle,
Yeah.
right? They've really got to improve the spots 15 through 35. And I think this is the draft to do it. Do you need a starting running back? Because you can get one in round 3. In fact, we might see our first running back come off the board in round 3. Do you need a linebacker? I think there's going to be some really good ones available in that spot. How about a cornerback? The corners, you can find a slot corner in, late round 2 with no problem at all. I would stick there, try to make as many picks as possible really quickly on their second first-round pick. To me, the strength of this draft is offensive line. I think the depth in the first round is unbelievable. If they decide to pass on an offensive tackle at 4, wait to the end of round 1, go get a Jordan Morgan. Maybe Mims from Georgia is there. Maybe Fontenot slides. Graham Barton is a really good player from Duke that can play all 3 interior spots. Yeah. I think they can find a quality offensive lineman in round or at the end of round 1 and don't feel like they have to maybe overdraft Joe Alt or Olof Ashanu or somebody else at that spot.
You know what? Marcus doesn't know this yet, but he's going to stay for another 5 minutes because I have like 3 more questions and we're running out of time. Alex Clancy, Marcus Mosher, what are the sleepers of this draft? There's 2 names that I see on every mock draft in the 3rd round, and I am shocked that they're still there. Hopefully Marcus doesn't leave because we've got 5 minutes and we'll see. Next, Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Some superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, man. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, surprise segment. Marcus didn't know this either. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, Marcus Mosher, for all intents and purposes here, Pro Football Focus 33rd team, also the host of Locked On Cowboys with Landon Cool and Locked On Dynasty. The dude knows a lot about how to build a team now, how to build a team through the draft, how to build a team through free agency, and have it sustainable through multiple years with his Locked On Dynasty experience as well. So there are 2 names. One that is about 2 inches shorter than everybody expected, and that's Xavier Legette. And 2 is Blake Corum. There's always one running back that goes like 20 picks higher than everybody had him slotted for. And I know that there are some really good running backs you can get in the 3rd round that don't have that pop name appeal that Blake Corum does because they won the national championship and he was the best running back on the team and everything like that. A little undersized, very girthy, as you can say, but start with Xavier Legette, okay? He was listed at 6'3", came in at 6'1", maybe, 6'1 and a half. But the dude in space, I call them gazelles, like Rondale Moore in space is incredible to watch. Okay. Lamar Jackson obviously was the OG. He was like, when you see him in space, I feel things, and Gronk was like that. So it doesn't have to be super special, like super smooth. Xavier Legette is like that. Yeah. Talk to me about Xavier Legette and why he may fall to the 3rd round, even when wide receiver is so much more of a premium position to draft higher than it's been, in the last decade, over the last, handful of years.
So Legette only has 1 year production at South Carolina, and that's going to scare teams off a little bit. On top of just not having a great Senior Bowl week, he didn't separate particularly well. There were some rumblings that maybe he was dealing with a hamstring injury. However, there's just not many guys that have that type of SEC production, even if it's only for 1 year, with his size and his speed profile. I do think in a draft that's really deep at receiver, it's possible that we see him go in the 70s or the 80s, where in most drafts, like for example, he's not that different than Jonathan Mingo. In fact, I think he might be a better overall receiver than Jonathan Mingo. Mingo went early 2nd round last year. You could get Xavier Legette in the 70s or the 80s this year. So I think Legette is really somebody that's really, really interesting. I've got a running back that I want to mention to you. Now, he blew up the combine a little bit, so it's not quite as exciting anymore, right. But Trey Benson is the running back that I've been circling for my Dallas Cowboys in the 2nd, 3rd round as, to me, my favorite running back in the class. At Pro Football Focus, we have this stat called yards missed tackles per attempt, right? And basically, since PFF has started to record this stat, the number one running back of all time is Bijan Robinson. Number 2 is Trey Benson, who you're not going to have to spend the 6th overall pick on Trey Benson. You can get him in on day 2. Runs a 4.39 at 215 pounds. He's physical. He loves contact. That is the type of guy that you draft. He can replace James Conner in a year, and he makes your offense even more dynamic.
That's fascinating because that's one thing that I've been – James Conner, and that's a great name. Everydayers, keep it in mind. Trey Benson. Okay, you heard it here first. It's hard to have the discussion sometimes with people where it's like the Cardinals need to sign another tight end. The Cardinals need to sign at least one more running back. They need to have depth in positions of strength. So if something were to happen, you wouldn't miss a step or you'd be 75% of what you were. With James Conner, in my humblest of opinions, this should be the LeGarrette Blount portion of his career.
Correct.
40% of the touch, the most important 40% of the touches. And that's it. And you've got 2 other guys in the backfield. If you're going to draft a guy in the 3rd round, this is the perfect year to do it. There's a loaded running back free agency class, half of which is not going to garner as much money nearly as it would have if they were the only half, with Saquon and everybody else out there. The Cardinals need to bolster that running back room tomorrow to be able to have a set and forget situation if something were to happen to James Conner. Do you agree with James Conner arguably is getting better every year when
it's crazy.
It's wild. And the best part, and you're from this part of the country, I would like at this point, people don't remember that Jerome Bettis played for the Rams. Okay, they don't, football people do, but people don't know that he played for the Rams before he played before the Steelers. I'm starting to see that with James Conner with the Steelers, where it's like he's going to retire an Arizona Cardinal. You need to keep him for the next 4 seasons. He can play until he's in his early 30s, and you just need to kind of pull it back a little bit, right?
You need to find the guy that's the Willie Parker to Jerome Bettis for James Conner, right? The guy that can come in, give you 16 touches a game, and add some speed element to your offense while James Conner continues to be efficient, early down back, short yardage, and then the occasional pass blocking back. That's not hard to find, by the way. You don't have to spend a super premium pick to find that. I think in this draft, 3rd round especially, that is a sweet spot to add a running back on a cheap deal that's going to be part of this team for the next 4 years. I wouldn't be opposed to Arizona drafting one 3rd round. Grab another one sometime on day 3 because this is a ridiculously deep running back class.
Yeah. And so, Michael, they actually just signed Michael Carter. He cleared waivers, I think, last year. I think he's obviously he's going to compete in camp, I would think, unless he gets a 1 or 2 year deal. The Jets did him no favors when he was there. People, have an affinity for him. He scored a touchdown. He showed some flashes. Talk to me, and I will get you out of here. This, I promise. Talk to me about Bucky Irving, because that's another hot button name, shorter, scat back. Jahmyr Gibbs makes him look big, but he's a guy out of that was a high-powered offense. Oh, and I will tell you this because I want you to think that I'm smart. Troy Franklin is my bell of the ball in this draft. It was Jordan Addison last year. Troy Franklin, whoever snags him, hopefully it's not the Bills or the damn Chiefs or somebody, but I think he's going to be the one that surprises everybody. Anyways, talk to me about Bucky Irving before we get out of here.
Yeah, not the most impressive combine. Ran a 4.55 at 192 pounds. I think he is somebody that needs to be part of a committee rather than a full-time starter. But again, you need that guy that can give you 12 touches in a game and be explosive. I do think that's Bucky Irving, and I think he is going to be an even bigger value than he was a week ago. I don't think he goes in the top 100 picks. I think he's a day 3 guy, and because I think teams are going to look at him as a part-time player. But for a team like the Cardinals that already has their established big back in James Conner, it's a perfect fit.
And tell me I'm right about Troy Franklin really quick.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're good.
I mean, I don't understand. It's I guess you could kind of say the same about Malik Neighbors. The offense was so high powered that it's well, anybody can do that. It's it diminishes what they do. Troy Franklin, another guy in space that is just mesmerizing to watch.
Yep. Lights out. He's good. I mean, you just need that speed. And again, somebody who I think is going to fall a little bit because this receiver class is so good. Don't be surprised if Troy Franklin doesn't get picked inside the top 40, 45 picks. This is going to make him a huge value.
Marcus Mosher at Marcus_Mosher on Twitter. Elon, let me back in, bro. It's been 2 weeks. Locked on Cowboys, Locked on Dynasty, Pro Football Focus, 33rd Team. One of the best follows out there. Marcus, thanks so much, man. I really
appreciate anytime.
it. Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.